Become a member, sign in, and start streaming today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the January 29th, 2021 edition of Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host, Dominic Dudi. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get to our first topic. Denver Mayor Michael Hancock announced an update on Denver's coronavirus relief strategy this week. Hancock stated that the city will open an emergency operations center and has asked the Biden administration for direct delivery of vaccines without going through the state. Meanwhile, Governor Polis received some pushback against claims he made on CNN about COVID testing for teachers in Colorado. Patty Calhoun from Westward, we're right before probably a big announcement from Governor Polis. We thought that he would have the decency to let us know beforehand when we tape at noon. Sadly, we don't know yet. So there might be more news about this. But from what we've heard from Mayor Hancock, what do you think about what's been announced and the new program that will be eligible for 500 businesses?
Well, the 5-star certification program, which starts on February 2nd in Denver, 500 businesses is a drop in the bucket. I mean, so this is actually a state program which allows businesses that are certified once the county is to operate at one level of fewer restrictions. So for restaurants, it means you could go to 50% instead of 25% capacity, later hours. It's a great program in counties where the numbers are down, and it's been enacted in a few already. So we'll see how it happens, but Summit County got a lot of people okayed for the program quickly. Will Denver do as well? We'll see. It takes a while. You know, basically, we've had an emergency center in Denver back when the COVID first hit. All PR people are basically working on an emergency basis because numbers change all the time, rules change all the time. We see that with the vaccinations. I don't see DC actually agreeing to suddenly deal with mayors when you've got 50 states you're trying to get vaccines to, when they've found so many different problems just with the amount, the lack of a real system set up. So we will probably see the numbers and the way things are done changing almost daily.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. There's Patty talked about the vaccine distribution, and it's bringing up a lot of questions about local control because you have mayors who know their city better than maybe a state official would, but does that exacerbate the problem for the federal government? Is there a model that can help us through this vaccine distribution and still maximize the experts who know the situation best?
Well, exactly. As you say, usually the most efficient things are done at the local level because the local people know the local conditions best. On the other hand, what is the demonstrated managerial competence of the Denver city government? What if they manage vaccine distribution as well as they manage airport construction? Governor Polis, in his CNN interview, I thought demonstrated a lot of competence. And as he said, most Colorado schools have been open during this academic year, and he supports that. And as he points out, the data show that the risks are for schools are quite low in general. And just today there was a story in the Denver Post about what a tremendous drop in learning has been inflicted on most of the children in the Denver public schools by their quite mediocre online alternatives. In terms of testing, the biggest problem is the Federal Food and Drug Administration. Under both Trump and Biden, the FDA says you can't buy an at-home test without a prescription. That's like saying you can't take your temperature without a prescription. When HIV was a big problem, the FDA restricted home tests. These days, they're concentrating on restricting genetic testing. If they got their foot off the throat of the American consumer, people could be a lot healthier.
Eric Sarman joins us remotely, a columnist with the Denver Gazette and Colorado Politics. Eric, it's great to have you on the program. Polis got fairly good reviews handling the crisis in 2020, but many more questions have come up in 21. How do you think it's going for him and how the state is handling the crisis so far?
Well, I think it's mainly a function, Dominic, of people just being growingly impatient. We heard that these vaccines were approved back in the November and December time period. And I think so many people locally, nationally, just sort of said, oh my God, we're there, or we're very close. Well, as we've discussed, that was just the start, getting the science down, getting the medicine and the biology down was just the start of this, and this has turned into an immense logistical challenge facing this country, obviously facing the state. I'm not sure it's healthy to have a competitive environment between Denver and the state. I think we all have to be in this same boat together, but there is a competitive nature. I mean, if vaccines are limited, what goes into one person's arm does not go into somebody else's arm. So whether it's jurisdictions fighting with each other or even, growing jealousy among individuals, it's probably something we're going to live with for some time. Lastly, just with respect to Governor Polis, it's worth noting that one of his main advisors and staff people with regard to COVID has now been picked up in a senior capacity by the Biden administration. Her name is Casey Wolf, and best wishes to her, but it probably speaks to some degree of respect, at least among the Biden crowd, for how Colorado has handled this.
Greg Moore joins us also remotely, editor-in-chief at Deke Digital. Awesome name for all the hockey fans out there. Greg, how do you think the state is doing in the various ways the questions are coming up about distribution? Because there's a lot of different communities that are getting questions, whether it be teachers, the homeless, folks in prison, folks who are 70 plus, 65 plus, communities of color. There's a whole lot of questions going on. Are we getting the right answers?
No, we're not. And there's a lot of confusion. And most of that really stems from the disarray in the waning days of the Trump administration. If the feds had sort of handled the planning a lot better, I think we'd be in much further along. But there's some real questions about the fairness of the distribution model where, communities of color are underrepresented when it comes to the vaccinations. And if I were the mayor, I would certainly want to get my arms around that situation. As David was saying, the local communities generally have a better idea of where that vaccine needs to go. They have a better relationship on the local level with various communities. They have more trust. And if you want to get those vaccines in the arms in a fair way, I think you really need to use the local government mechanisms that already have established channels of trust and communication to get that done. Secondly, I think the state and local governments are under enormous pressure to get their economies going, and from businesses, from parents who want their kids in school. Enormous pressure. And I think, for me, I want to make sure that they're doing it carefully. I thought that Polis was a little over his skis when he said that teachers were being tested, twice a week. It was probably a miscommunication, but it shows you the pressure that these guys are under to sort of get things operational again for lots of reasons, but mostly for tax receipts. I mean, if they don't want to have to start cutting services in 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 months, they better get this economy moving, and there's a huge amount of pressure to get that done.
Let's get to our next topic. Approximately 4,600 Republicans in Colorado quit the Republican Party between January 6th and January 12th, with a spike occurring immediately after the Capitol Hill riot. Around 4,400 of those switched to unaffiliated status, and 200 switched to the Democratic Party. The remainder was split between conservative third parties. David, there's a lot of former Republicans in the unaffiliated status in Colorado, so that's not a huge surprise. But did the numbers reacting in Colorado surprise you?
Seemed about within an expectable range. I mean, what some people who left the Republican Party recently or since 2016 still believe is what Republicans said during the Clinton years. 1, character counts, and 2, a self-governing republic will self-destruct if it chooses leaders of low moral caliber. That's why Donald Trump won exactly 0 delegates at the 2016 Colorado Republican Convention. Yet when Trump became president, he did advance lots of standard Republican issues like reduced taxes, improved national defense, and educational freedom. Plenty of Republicans always realized that Trump was a lout and a blowhard, and they also saw that his words were often sound and fury, signifying nothing. But after Election Day, his words attempted to steal an election, and when the Capitol was invaded, his silence showed his complicity and at least his tacit support for the attack. So some people don't want to belong to a party that still supports a guy like that. Before the election, Trump expanded the Republican base among working people of all races. After the election, he's been a one-man wrecking crew on the party.
Eric, we've seen the Colorado GOP at odds at the very local level, the Colorado legislature, between the likes of Kevin Priola and Patrick Neville. Right now, with the Kevin Priola, at least crowd or who he represents, getting the upper hand in that battle, do you think this symbolizes that there's going to be further soul-searching or conflicts within the Colorado Republican Party?
Well, there has to be. There better be, and it better be soon, and the soul searching better be deep. The numbers you cited in your question, Dominic, I think are only the tip of the iceberg. Those are people who logged on to actually change their party affiliation. I think the bigger number is people who just sort of tuned out, and they may not have gone to the effort of changing their registration, but they sure changed their attitude. I thought a lot of what David just said was very wise. What I disagree with is, I don't remember the exact words, but to the effect that a lot of Republicans are seeing through Donald Trump. As I look at this, the moderates, the Kevin Priolas of the world, the Cole Wists of the world in Colorado are the exception, not the rule. And I mean, this remains very much Donald Trump's party. In Colorado, it's Lauren Boebert's party until somebody shakes it loose. I have a column running this weekend, shameless plug, that asks a number of questions about Colorado politics coming up over the next year as sort of a preview. But one of those questions is the Colorado Republican Party poised for a comeback, or is it now just permanently a basket case? 2022 ought to be a banner year for Colorado Republicans as an off year for Joe Biden. There's a Senate seat, there's a governor's race, there's a bunch of other stuff. But at this point in time, until the Republicans can get their act together and demonstrate that, you'd have to put your money on basket case.
Well, Greg, as we look at the opportunities next up for the Colorado GOP, it's facing pretty substantial incumbents in Governor Polis and Senator Michael Bennet. But right now, we heard today that Ken Buck is not interested in running against Michael Bennet, and we haven't heard any other big names. Is there time for the Colorado GOP to find themselves rally around some candidates that have a chance against some fairly decent incumbents?
Well, you know what? I think the fact that you're seeing, in Ohio and in Colorado, representatives in Congress deciding not to go for statewide office just tells you that they realize the gig is up. That unless they stay in safe districts, they're out. Okay. You have a sitting senator in Ohio that's not running, and Jeffords just announced, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay right here in this red district. So they know they're hanging on by their fingernails, and I don't know if they can recruit the kind of candidates that would have a broad appeal, particularly to independents. But that's really the challenge for them if they want to win statewide office. Is they got to be careful about the kind of candidates that come forward. QAnon adherents, that's just not going to work on a statewide level, and I think that's what you're beginning to see. When you have a person like Ken Buck step away from the challenge of, going against Bennett in a statewide race. So, the thing that's most interesting about the changing of the party affiliations is that it's happened so early, right? Normally, it happens much closer to an election, a primary, or whatever. And I do think, as Eric said, it's a little bit of a wake up call. I think it's something to pay attention to, and there's definitely some dissatisfaction, not just with the Republican Party and what happened on January 6th, but with party politics in general. It's just a mess, and I think this movement that we're seeing right now in the early part of this year is an indication of that level of dissatisfaction.
Pat, do you think that there's an opportunity here for the Kevin Priolas of Colorado to say this is the canary in the coal mine? We've got to do something to actually make some hay with it?
Well, someone in the Colorado Republican Party has to do something if it is going to survive. I think right now, first of all, Lauren Boebert should be sending a thank you letter to Representative Taylor Greene for making her look a little less crazy, which is saying a lot to make her look less crazy. I think the best chance for the Republican Party in Colorado is to do a switch. Trade all of Weld County to Wyoming, since Weld County wants to go there anyway. Bring Liz Cheney down, who already has more charisma than most Colorado Republicans.
I can see a lot of people thinking that's a pretty intriguing trade. Let's get to our next topic. New oil and gas rules are being implemented in Colorado in an effort to slow climate change. Millions of acres of wildlife will now require permission from Colorado Parks and Wildlife before any drilling or development occurs. Meanwhile, Denver's Office of Climate Action, Resiliency and Stability plans to require any homes being built must be mostly powered by renewable energy sources by 2027. Eric, we have talked a lot about the oil and gas industry around this table, both physically and virtually. Right now does not seem to be a particularly strong era for the oil and gas industry, but it's not like it's just suddenly going to go away. Is this a sign for more battles to come? And I guess what we would, in the past would have called the oil and gas wars.
Yeah, probably the biggest falsehood that Governor Polis ever spoke was after some of these oil and gas initiatives went away a few years ago, when he said something to the effect of, well, that puts an end to the oil and gas wars in Colorado. I don't have the exact quote, but that was the gist of it. Of course, that is a falsehood. In terms of these specific regulations and the actions of the ill-named Denver office, no one argues with the intent. No one argues with the worthiness and importance of the pursuit. The question is just how far you take it. It's not only that the oil and gas industry is not leaving Colorado anytime soon, it's that our need for oil and gas power is not going away anytime soon. So no one argues with the intent, but Democrats just have to be a little conscious and cautious about how far they want to take it. Biden stepped pretty close to that line by spiking the Keystone Pipeline in one of his first official moves, and Colorado Democrats have similar decisions ahead.
Greg, you made a great point in your previous comment about the economy and the pressure on officials to do something about the economy. It sounds like eliminating or doing more to harm a major player in Colorado's economy, that being the oil and gas industry, there'd be some pressure to ease up on that industry as well. But I don't know if this reflects that. What do you think?
Well, I think that the acreage that has to be permissioned for development is a way to sort of create some wiggle room here with those regulations, right? I think it's really telling that the Conservation Commission, and coming up with these regulations, they had talked to all the stakeholders, including the oil and gas industry. And the fact that you don't really hear them screaming and hollering about the regs indicates that they got a considerable bit of what they wanted here. Somebody had said everybody that's been involved in this process is a little singed by it, but the fact that you don't hear a lot of screaming and a sort of wait and see, I think that when you look at the permissible parts of the development acreage, I think you're going to see that the oil and gas industry is probably going to get a little bit more what they want than you think.
Patty, when you hear things from the Denver Office of Climate Action, Resiliency and Stability, it's a heck of a name, wanting to make renewable energy sources the main power for homes by 2027, energy-wise, that's next week. Is that realistic? Is that something that Denver officials should be looking at?
Well, they're also looking for net zero with Denver businesses and buildings. And I can tell you, people are screaming. Greg was talking about screaming. You can hear businesses across Denver, which are already hit by the pandemic, screaming about that. I can't even imagine what I'd have to do I think I'm still using coal in my house to heat it. But also, when you're talking about the screaming, nationally, we are switching from, you're getting whiplash. We're switching from Colorado's David Bernhardt, head of the Interior, to Deb Haaland, who's coming up for confirmation. She's a really interesting person to take the lead in Interior, and I hope we don't hear too much screaming from the Republicans over her nomination.
David, is this a sign of larger problems in how Colorado is dealing with the oil and gas industry?
Huge problems for people losing their livelihoods. There's an old story that the French Queen Marie Antoinette, when she was told that the peasants didn't have enough money for bread, said, let them eat cake, which actually she never said. But there's a true story that global warming czar Zar Carey is a billionaire thanks to his advantageous marriage to a widow who inherited her late husband's fortune. And so the czar was asked, what will happen to all the people who are losing their jobs because the Biden administration is strangling fossil fuels? And I hope Greg's right, but it seems the problem's going to be aggravated in Colorado by even further restrictions on state lands. And Zar Carey replied that they can get jobs assembling solar panels, or as the Colorado governor's office says, just transition. If the Tsar knew a little bit more about the lives of the little people who have to work for a living, he might know that the large majority of solar panels are made in China because they have a huge cost advantage over the United States. One, as in all communist countries, the workers have no rights, so wages are low. And two, Chinese manufacturing uses low-cost, abundant energy from coal and oil.
Let's get a quick take on this last topic. Colorado-based company Dominion Voting Systems recently filed a 107-page lawsuit against former President Donald Trump's former lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. The company said Giuliani defended and promoted demonstrably false accusations of voter fraud and is asking for $1.3 billion. Greg, your quick take on this. Is Dominion likely to see results?
They may win, but they may not actually get the money. I mean, Giuliani is owed a whole bunch of money from Donald Trump, and he's not going to get it. So it'll be sort of like getting blood out of a turnip. But I think as a business, they have to defend their reputation, and they should have sued Giuliani. He's been hammering on their business, on their integrity for, since the election. I don't think they had any choice. Whether they actually get the money, I don't think they will, but I do think they will win if it goes to court.
Patty, the right move for Dominion?
Oh, a smart move by Dominion, which is a Denver company. It works in 28 states already. There have been no proven cases of fraud with Dominion. They need to fight back. They've already sued Sidney Powell. They'll probably sue plenty of other people. But they might not win in court because it may never get there, but they will win in the court of public opinion.
David, one of our esteemed lawyer today, what do you think about the suit and Dominion's chances?
The Denver Post has a good op-ed today by Harvard professor Noah Feldman showing that why Dominion has a challenging case, just because the rules on libel are so strict. But I lived in Brooklyn in the 1980s, back when Rudy Giuliani was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. And back then, it was the same as he is now. He's an unscrupulous sleaze who ruins people's lives, back then with prosecutions that eventually fell apart once the Second Circuit looked at it and saw the facts were bogus and the U.S. Attorney's Office engaged in legal misconduct. So Giuliani's pattern of trying to ruin people's lives so he can get on TV is a very long-standing one.
Eric, hell hath no fury like a voting systems company slandered?
Well, I hope Dominion prevails in court. I hope they collect. And then I hope they use that largesse to move into new Denver offices in the penthouse of the Four Seasons Hotel.
Hear, hear. Let's get to our favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week. As always, Ms. Calhoun, please start us off.
Well, there have been so many disgraces lately. I couldn't get to this one. Steve Bannon's pardon. The most cynical, fraudulent activity, the whole we build the wall, let's get the money donated. But not only has he been pardoned, but he is now leaving a Colorado man, Timothy Shea, who was also charged with him, in the hot seat, because if Bannon was pardoned for a crime, what happens to the guys going on trial in May?
Fair question. David.
The 800 people who invaded the U.S. Capitol included people of different races. But even if all 800 had been white, they'd be a quite minuscule fraction of the 234 million white people in the United States. Yet at the University of Colorado Springs, the Associate Vice Chancellor for Equity and Diversity and Inclusion went on a video rant against white people. And according to her, "White America, I need you to fix your freaking families. This is your fault." That's like blaming all Muslims for 9/11. Vice Chancellor Stephanie Rose Spalding could do a better job of fostering an inclusive campus atmosphere.
Eric, we go to you for your Disgrace of the Week.
Well, since I suspect you're not going to give me 10 minutes, Dominic, to go through all the disgraces that we could this week, let me just focus on the proposed Biden administration and congressional stimulus package of just shy of $2 trillion, and the notion that these $2,000 stimulus payments are going to go to everyone, regardless of income, regardless of need, regardless of how they have been hurt by COVID. There are wealthy people in this country, well-off people in this country, who do not need these stimulus checks, should not receive them, and this one-size-fits-all is not becoming.
Greg, what's your Disgrace of the Week?
I'm going to give it to the porch pirates who are following Amazon vans and UPS trucks around and stealing packages off of people's porches. I hope that some creative kid, comes up with a Home Alone jury-rigged contraption that drops a bucket of poop on them when they reach down for the package. It's outrageous.
By far one of our most creative disgraces of the week. Well done there, Greg. Let's get to Say Something Nice. Patty?
Tromping on Eric's turf, but Coors Field will soon see the Rockies again. But unfortunately, Don Ble Jr., who was so critical to bringing Major League Baseball here, passed away. So sorry for him, but thank you for what he did. Also, I want to say a quick shout out to Bri Davies, who's a contributor both here and at Westward, who's the new host of CityCast, a podcast coming here in March.
Hear, hear. David?
Senators Bennett and Hickenlooper for fighting to keep the Federal Bureau of Land Management in Grand Junction. Regulators should live among the people they regulate, and the vast majority of Bureau of Land Management lands are in the Rocky Mountain West, so that's where the agency should be too.
Eric, time to say something nice.
You're here to David's point, but going much larger here. The Soviet dissident Alexei Navalny, who is, after being poisoned, after other attacks or attempts on his life, is emerging as the rallying cry of a movement that is probably more of a threat to Vladimir Putin than any other dissident movement so far. So hooray to some of what is going on in Russia.
Greg, we go to you next.
Yeah, I'm going to give it to Rico Givens Padilla, a senior at North High School who managed to persevere during this pandemic, studying remotely from home, and just found out this week that he got into Harvard University.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And I want to get in and say something nice. About a week and a half or so ago, I was remiss to not mention an important congratulations to my family, my Aunt Lean and Uncle Richard Rotola, celebrating 62 years together. I'm not sure which one of them will first apply and qualify for sainthood, but I'm sure both of them are going to be right in line. So Aunt Lean and Uncle Richard, congratulations. And indeed, I also want to thank all of you, our members and our viewers out there of Colorado Inside Out and PBS 12. As we've been collecting all of our data from 2020, we realized that we were very lucky as a nonprofit organization to get a whole lot of support from all of you. There are a lot of different organizations that can't say that, but we are able to say we're in good shape because of all of you. So thank you for so much of your support over these years, and especially in a difficult year like last year. For everybody here at PBS 12 and Colorado Inside Out, I'm Dominic Dudi. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.